Hey guys, Jack from Ride and Shine Detail here again. We're going to be talking about the Swisstrax that we installed about a month or so ago. So we've had a lot of time with them to kind of assess how we like them, essentially what we like, what we don't like. We'll be going over all of that, kind of the cost, benefit, and as well we'll talk a little bit about the installation of it. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. So the most obvious thing that we really like about the Swisstrax is just the way they look. It really spruces the place up, makes it much more professional. It's easier to work on as well. And you can go to their website on Swisstrax, okay, and you can...
He's a puppy.
Oh. And as you can see, Oki likes them a lot too. What's really nice is, so as you guys have seen before in our earlier videos, so we just had the concrete underneath here. So it didn't take any like refinishing of the concrete or anything. We didn't have to level anything out like you would with your painting. We didn't have to fill in any cracks. All you had to do is just blow everything out, sweep it up, and then you're good to go to install them. So as far as that goes, it's very easy, but it's costly. So we got a little bit of a cheaper option. It's the Swisstrax. They also have the more popular and well-known is the Swisstrax version. So the Swisstrax, which we have, are about $5 a tile. I believe the Swisstrax are maybe like another 50 or 60 cents more. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of tiles, it adds up fast. I'm pretty happy with the decision we made. Honestly, if I had to do it again, I'd probably do more Swisstrax. Right now we don't have any, especially because the Swisstrax, so first off, the difference between the Swisstrax and the Swisstrax. Smooth are essentially just flat. And then the Swisstrax, or what it sounds like, it's like a little rib, so it kind of has a curve to it. Because of that, with Swisstrax, the water just slips down underneath the tile. It doesn't sit on the surface, whereas Swisstrax, the water has a chance to sit and dry, and then it creates stains, which then you have to go back and wash or mop. So that is a really big pain, especially if you're a car detailing space where you're having a lot of water and dirt. So you're gonna have to be on top of it 24/7, just constantly cleaning. Why that's such a big problem for us especially is because our wash bay currently isn't covered in Swisstrax. So when the car is getting washed, it's just sitting in the standing dirty water, and then when we drive it up onto the Swisstrax, it tracks in all that dirt. So in the future, I'll put Swisstrax in the wash bay, so that way the water falls underneath, it doesn't stick to the surface, and that way when we pull in the vehicle off the wash bay area into the smooth Swisstrax, where we're in the paint correction bay, or over here where we do a lot of detailing, that way it will stay cleaner. So that's what I'm envisioning. Even though it does stain a good amount, it's usually very easy to get the stains out. Just put some all-purpose cleaner in a mop and you just go right over it. It's not a big deal. The only thing I have seen that has been a bit of a bear to get out is kind of some certain oil stains, just things that drip from your car. Being a car shop, we do get a lot of that. I've only seen maybe 1 or 2 spots in the past like month and a half that really don't come out. It's not that big a deal. I wish it didn't stain, but so would a painted floor. That would stain as well. In fact, I would imagine it would stain a lot more. It'd be harder to get anything out of a painted floor. This stuff is very resistant. Not only does it resist stains really well, but it can withstand a lot of force and weight. So it is advertised as withstanding 60 tons, not in one particular small spot. It would have to be kind of separated, spread out over an area, kind of like a big truck. For example, I tested it with our jack stand and some jacks on my car, and I found that the jacks, especially the jack itself, a little bit the jack stands that dug into and dented the Swisstrax. And to combat that, most people just recommend, you'll see it on the internet, is just put some wood blocks, just get some really thick. I got plywood about that thick. You can put your jack stands on it. You also put your jack on the actual wood. That way it disperses all the weight and it's not focusing on one little small spot. Also, why we went with the Swisstrax instead of the Swisstrax option was not just because of the low cost, but it's also because it's smooth. So if you're leaning down and you have to kneel and work, that's not gonna hurt your knees over time where the Swisstrax will just kind of dig into your knees. especially because detailing is a very like on your hands and knees, especially when you're doing something on the exterior like the rims. So I wanted something comfortable for our workers where they're not just constantly in pain while they're just sitting down. It can still be a little bit of pain. I experienced that when I was installing them. So when I first installed them, I was really excited just to get started. So I just started without any kind of like knee protection. I even just was using my hands instead of a mallet. And just within the first 5-10 minutes, my hands and my knees were just destroyed. So definitely I recommend if you're gonna be installing your own Swisstrax to get some sort of knee pads, or like what we used, I used a little rolling stool on the ground. That way I can move around fast, still be comfortable. And I got a rubber mallet from Home Depot, which sped the process up dramatically. Another thing I recommend if you're gonna be installing these yourselves is have a second person with you. The way I did it with having a second person is I was hammering in the tiles, and then the second person would be ahead of me, laying them down in the correct pattern. Obviously, he had to do it in, for this section, the red and white, you had to go red and white checkered. But when you're orienting the tiles, you can't just throw them down willy-nilly in whatever direction. You would think, I mean, it's a square, you can just do whatever you want, but there are tabs that interlock with each other and they should all be facing in the same direction. So 2 sides that have tabs and then 2 sides that don't. The 2 sides with the tabs have to all be facing the same direction. So that way they can all interlock. And the way I went about installing it is I first set up this white border here. And once I had the white border done, I put in the center black pieces. And then from there, I extended it out towards the walls. And I left the edges on the walls empty. And then I just continued and did the entire garage, and I did all the edges last, because what you're gonna have to do is, if the full square isn't flush with the wall, let's say a square is 1 foot long and there's a 6-inch space for a square, you're gonna have to cut that square from 12 inches to 6 inches. So I had to go to Home Depot, get a tile cutter, have to measure as you're going the distance you need, and then you have to cut that. So that is really the only really technical part about installing these. You just kind of have to be cognizant of your spacing and make sure you don't overcut, or especially overcut. You can undercut, meaning like if I need to go from 12 inches to 6 inches, but I accidentally overcut, I go to 5 inches. Now there's gonna be a giant gap in between the wall and the tile, so it's just not gonna look as good. So it's better to undercut first and then work your way down slowly if you have to your correct sizing. That's something I learned the hard way. I messed up so many times because I just wasn't paying attention. I had to reorder new tiles. All in all, it wasn't that many tiles I had to reorder. It was maybe like 20 or so. So not too bad. Is when you are cutting, it is not the end of the world if you leave a gap between the wall and the tile, especially if you are in a garage where you have a turning space. So when we come in from the wash bay and then we have to turn right into the paint correction area, what we seem to be having a problem with is that turn is kind of bubbling up. So it goes from flat and then it kind of bubbles the tiles. And I think part of the problem is I didn't leave enough space between the walls. That way it doesn't really expand and contract that well with the tires moving. So it it tries to expand into the wall, but then it buckles up and it creates this bubble where the tires are. So I'm thinking I might have to take up some of the edge tiles back here, take off a couple, like 1 inch or so, that way it can expand and contract better. I have heard as well from other reviews I've seen where people, I think this is more along the lines of a cheaper Swisstrax option, kind of like a knockoff brand. If you buy any kind of Chinese brands, they expand and contract a lot with heat. So if you have a lot of windows in your garage and the sun is hitting the tiles, they'll expand when they're hot and then contract when they're cold. So especially in that case, if you're having a cheaper version, I would leave more space in between the wall and the tile. That way it has that space to move around. But I mean, other than that, yeah, I love these things. I would 100% get them again. I think it's totally worth it. Really, really looks professional and sleek. Can't wait to do the rest of the garage. And I think that about covers everything. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one. Take care.